Hello everyone, this is your teacher Julian Marin, and today we're going to check Martes de Prueba number 4 for the 8th grade in the year 2026. Thank you very much for watching. Now, I'm going to start sharing my screen specifically on the test. Okay, so here you have it, 8th grade, Martes de Prueba number 4 in the English section. Okay, so remember that the English section is always at the end, so the recommendation is as it happens also in the ICFES test, administer pretty well the time, so when you get there, you have plenty of time to solve the English section. Okay, sometimes this is one of the problems we confront. So let's start by analyzing the type of questions or exercises we have. In this case, we have two different kinds of exercises. On the first part over here, right below the label English, we have just one question, question 21, based on a specific kind of exercise in which you just need to complete a conversation. And after that, we have the second part of the test, or the English section, which consists of a reading comprehension exercise, which of course will demand more time and more cognitive resources. So let's start by solving the easy one from my perspective is this question 21. Completing the conversation, the sentence over here, what you need to put into practice is not only your comprehension of the situation, but also they're testing your knowledge of vocabulary. So you better pay attention to all these elements: vocabulary, the context, what is happening in the conversation, and also trying to cancel the possible answers that are essentially put there to confuse you. Okay, this happens, and it happens intentionally increasing the difficulty of the test and confirming your level of understanding and knowledge of the language. So let's start here with 21. This is the conversation. It is actually part in question, okay? Look, he is my favorite football player. So what's the setting? Football, right? That's the context. Isn't he the best? So there is a direct question. So we need to look for an answer for this question in that context. A, well, it depends on the type of sport you practice. So we're talking about sports, yes, but this answer is not really answering this question. So it is tricky, but no. B, yes, I saw him cheering up the audience the last match. So match, sports, audience, yes, but cheering up is not a football player technique. I mean, cheering up is more like his personality and his connection with the audience and the fans. So really here, I mean, if he's has a good personality and he has a good connection, is not related to his football skills. So that is why it's tricky, and I will not choose this answer either. Let's see answer C before we confirm. C, I think he's a great player, but there are better players. So this one, even though the person who's answering the question disagrees with the person who asked the question is the only one that really answers the question. Okay, so for 21, we already have found the answer, C. Now let's take a look right here. Let's take a look to the next exercise. Essentially what we have is a text, right? We have a story that is told here in this paragraph and then continuing here. And then we have 4 questions based on the information that is given. Always remember what they're testing here is our critical reading, just as much as when we develop or solve the section of critical reading or reading comprehension in Spanish. Only that in this case it's more difficult because we're working with a foreign language. So we also need to have enough lexicon, vocabulary for understanding the story, the ideas, the arguments, not only in the text, but also in the questions and the possible answers. This is definitely in the ICFES test and in Martes de Prueba, in the English section, definitely one of the most difficult activities. Now, some of them are easier than others, but this is intentional because uh, you need to put on the scale of proficiency. So that is why it is intentional. So let's start by first reading the story. And then, of course, we're going to be answering the questions while the information and the story is still fresh in our memories. So let's start right here. In 1812, a 3-year-old boy was playing with his father leather workshop, in his father's leather workshop, when he had an accident that would change, the world. Louis Braille accidentally poked himself in the eye with an awl. The metal point blinded him in one eye, and an infection soon left him totally blind. Louis won a scholarship to a school for the blind in Paris. It was not a nice place. Students were often fed bread and water and locked up for punishment. There, Louis and other blind children were taught to read. At that time, books for the blind weighed 100 pounds. One day, a soldier visited the school and talked about a code system that he had invented in the French army. It used raised dots and dashes on a piece of paper to allow soldiers to send messages in the dark while remaining silent. The children found the system too confusing, but the basic idea stuck in Louis' head. He began to he began experimenting with different ways of creating a language using raised dots on paper. One day, Louis picked up a pair of dice and felt the 6 dots on one side. That's when inspiration struck him. He soon developed a code for each letter of the alphabet, all using no more than 6 dots. One great advantage of his system was that you could read each letter. With practice, a reader could run his finger along a line and read very quickly. It took many years for the Braille system to take off, and its popularity was still spreading when Louis died in 1852. Okay, so right here we have just finished reading the text. We got a lot of information. As I mentioned before, it is a good idea to answer the questions while they're still fresh in your memory. Okay, so let me just zoom in just enough to see the 4 questions so we can start analyzing and answering. Question 22. Why was Louis Braille able to invent the Braille system? So we got 3 options here. A, because first he felt the dots on the dice, and later, so that was like the first event and second event later, he learned the soldier's code. This one we cancel because it was the opposite. First, he learned the code, and second, he felt the dots. So we cancel A. B, because he was a brilliant boy who wanted to invent a reading system for the blind. Okay, even though this was true, this is not really answering the question because they're asking about the circumstances. Okay, not about his intentions or his intelligence. C. So B is not a good option. C, because the soldier's code was confusing, but he used the idea using the dice dots. So this one is more connected with the information that was given. So that is why I will choose C. Let's analyze question 23. Besides his health problems caused by the accident, what other circumstances were made Louis' life harder? So we're talking about why his life was more difficult. What circumstances? A, the treatment he and the other boys received at school. This is a good option, and they actually mention it explicitly in a couple of lines that they were not receiving a good treatment and that the school was not a nice place. Anyway, let's evaluate B and C. B, it was too easy to understand the soldier's code. This is not really answering the question. We're talking about his life being hard. So this is not really answering the question. C, it was difficult for him to read because he was blind. So we're talking hard, we're talking difficult. This is a trick. They mention these synonyms so you can get confused. And if you don't read carefully, you could be choosing C, but no. The answer will be A. 24. How old was Louis Braille when he got completely blind? Okay, so yes, they mention he was 3 years old. So pay attention to this. How old? This is answering directly the question. Now, B, he was just a newborn. No, this is not true because the accident happened when he was 3. And then they say it happened in 1812. Yes, the accident happened in 1812, but the question is not when did it happen. The question was how old was he? So that is why this is also tricky. It is a tricky option. The correct option here will be A because this is answering the question. And let's analyze question and options for question 25. Why did Louis Braille get completely blind if he hurt only one of his eyes? Let's see. A, because the injury was so deep that finally affected the other eye. Okay, yes, it is true that the other eye was affected, but it was because of an infection, not because of the depth of the sting, right? So this one is also tricky. I will analyze the other two options. B, because as a consequence of the accident, his healthy eye got infected. Yes, they mentioned infection and they mentioned that the other eye, which was the good eye, not the eye that got popped, got infected. Okay, this is a good option. But let's evaluate the last one. C, because they all damaged the right eye and later affected the left eye. This was not mentioned. They mentioned the affected eye and the other eye. They never mentioned which was the right, or if it was the right, or if it was the left. So this is also tricky. And over here, they're testing your critical reading. Okay, so very easily we can identify right here that the correct option will be B, sticking to the information that is given in the text. So yes, as I told you, this exercise is one of the most difficult ones in the English section, right? But you need to be prepared, you need to be ready. So that is why you need to administer very well the test, including when you start. You can scan all the activities, and if you can see them in English, you have a more simple exercise that will take less time. That is also a good strategy. Whereas when you see that you have a long test, it's going to take more time for you not only to read, but to evaluate the options. It is a good thing to keep in track your time during the administration of the test. So with this, we're finishing the review for Martes de Prueba number 4 for the 8th grade in 2026. Thank you very much for watching. I keep asking you, please, to click on like, continue watching, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and also promote so other people can benefit from these reviews. Thank you very much. I hope to see you in the future.